So, as usual, we're going to do the recitation of this praise to Shakyamuni Buddha just one time together. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. And we'll do the short mandala offering. We'll just recite this in English as usual. This ground, and by the way, we'll be talking about the mandala offering tonight, so you get a little more information on that. But this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Then refuge as usual, once in English, twice in the Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyapsu chi daki chunyen gi pe sonam gi dola penchir sangye drupar sho sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyapsu chi Daki chunyan gi pe sanam gi dola penchir sangye drupar shok. All right, let's do a short meditation. Just give ourselves a chance to come into this space to, kind of calm the mind a bit using the breath for the first few minutes, just as our meditation object in order to let go of whatever distractions we might have. And you can use whatever technique you prefer with the breath. And then I'll lead you in a short reflection to set our motivation together. So we can begin the meditation now. So now to set our motivation for tonight, looking at the world that we're living in, and certainly it's challenging and difficult, but samsara has always been challenging and difficult. It's important that we don't get discouraged by what's going on in our world at this time and recognize that the answer to all the world's problems, every single being's situation can be remedied. And the answer is the Buddha's path, the path that will lead to the complete fulfillment of each of our potential. Every one of us having the ability to transform our minds into the state of Buddhahood, a state of unparalleled well-being and bliss. But we generate the wish to achieve that always with the main motivation, the motivation of benefiting all beings. Because this is how it works. We are able to achieve our true welfare by being focused on the welfare of others. So when we look at the world that we live in and see how many beings are blind to this reality, are not aware of the potential they have in their own minds, and the ability to practice a path that will lead to completely fulfilling that potential and allowing them to again know this state of Buddhahood, to have this unparalleled experience. All the problems in the world, all the challenges are caused by sentient beings not being in touch with that and not living within that idea of trying to move ourselves gradually, step by step, to that state of enlightenment, Buddhahood. So in this way, we see that cultivating bodhicitta is the response that we need to the suffering of the world. To generate that wish to benefit each and every single sentient being without exception, so that we then can, become a Buddha on the basis of that thought, that aspiration, achieve our own state of well-being, state of Buddhahood, and then work effortlessly, spontaneously, perfectly for the welfare of all other beings. And just hold that thought in your heart as your response to the suffering of the world, particularly at this time. Just the way we create the causes eventually for the happiness of all beings, ourselves included. And then you can open your eyes fully, and we'll begin our class. So we are, again, working our way through the middle length Lamrim. Sorry about the 2-week break, but we got another one coming up between now and the next class when I'll be back in Santa Fe. So this is just, again, necessitated by my travel and the things that I'm doing out here in California, and teachings and retreat and what have you that I'm leading. So thank you all for your understanding on that. So we're at the section where we've gone through the preliminary or preparatory practices. Recall that there are 6 of those that we should ideally do as part of our daily meditation practice. Tonight we're going to move into the meditation practice after we finish these 6. We were on the 5th one. The 5th one being the accumulation of merit and the purification of negativity, specifically through this 7-limb practice. Called the 7-limb practice, kind of embodies all of those different elements. There's not a lot involving purification, but the one we're going to start with tonight is actually involving the purifying our negativities. But there's a lot of them that are about accumulating merit or increasing our merit, dedicating our merit. Certainly we're going to see at the end, making sure that our merit doesn't diminish in any way. So this is what we're working our way through. Sorry, I've got quite a glare on my glasses here. I'm looking at the screen and recognizing that it might be kind of hard for you to see my eyes tonight, but sorry about that. Just the lighting I have to have on is overhead in this room where I'm at. Okay, let me share on the screen the little chart that has to do with the 7 limbs, just so we can reorient ourselves with this, and then we'll go right to our text. So again, this chart is in your handouts folder that you have access to on the Google Drive, and we have that little prayer, the 7-limb prayer. And these are the limbs that we've been going through. And again, I won't be going through all the information on this chart because the second part of this chart actually talks about what the remedies, what each of these seven limbs acts as a remedy to various minds, prostration, diminishing our pride, offering, diminishing our miserliness, and so on. So essentially, yeah, these are something that you can take a look at later. And then these are even the benefits that Lama Zopa Rinpoche set out in his daily meditation practice in terms of the seven limbs each providing a benefit, a result that they are able to accomplish. We are again working with the third one tonight. This is where we're going to start. We finished prostration and offering. So as you can see, the activity that we're involved with here is purifying negativities. And confession is involved in our process of dealing with the four opponent powers. That's what it says there as the main method. I think most of you have some familiarity with these four opponent powers, but we will be seeing them in much, much more detail when we get to the second part of this course. Second part of this course works with the topic of karma as one of the main topics in the stages of the path for the person that are shared with the person of least capacity. So again, most of you have a practice you probably do on a daily basis that involves some measure of purification. We have essentially just to briefly review. You have some level of regret or remorse that you need. I like to present them this way. This is also the way Venerable Rabina taught me to, work with them. So this is why I use them in this way. Sometimes they're in slightly different order. But the first one is regret or remorse. So we have to think about the things that we know we have done, or that we can infer that we've done, or even assume that we've done in prior lifetimes, and bring to mind this idea of regretting those, really wishing that we hadn't engaged in them. We did the best that we could. Unfortunately, we fell sway to the delusions. We engaged in unhealthy actions of body, speech, and mind. So generating regret is kind of the first step. Secondly, we need some form of reliance, something we can rely on as a basis for our purification. And in this case, it's two ideas. The first is refuge, where we reestablished our firm commitment and our sense of safe direction in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, especially the Dharma, as a way of kind of repairing the ways that we've transgressed the Dharma. Again, the Buddha isn't hurt by us transgressing the Dharma. We are the ones that are hurt. Purification, the whole thing, is a practice we're doing from our own side to purify our own negativities. We might visualize a Buddha figure like Vajrasattva as the means to help us embody that sense of refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But essentially, this is our own state of mind that is saying, I have conviction in the three jewels and in following this path, and I am kind of reaffirming that through this recitation of some sort of refuge verse. We also generate bodhicitta as a form of our reliance. And that starts to repair the relationship that we have with sentient beings who are frequently the objects of harm when we are engaged in these negative actions, such as killing or stealing and so on, lying, all these various actions. And again, I'm not going to go into all that detail because we'll get to that when we get to the topic of karma. But this is an important part of it, this kind of beginning to repair the relationship that we have by relying in a very strong way on those two minds, the mind that is reaffirming our refuge in the three jewels, and secondly, dedicating ourselves to benefiting all beings, again, who were harmed by our actions. The third of these three opponent powers after regret and reliance is the actual remedy. And the remedy or antidote is something we do that is positive, that acts as a counterforce, kind of blocking the negative energy from ripening into its full force. Sometimes through purification, we have a lesser ripening of that. Sometimes it doesn't ripen at all. But this is an important part of it. We have to have something we engaged in, whether it be mantra recitation or reciting the Heart Sutra or some other sutra, meditating on compassion, making a charitable donation. I mean, you can do any virtuous action. And as long as you're kind of lining it up with those negative actions that you're regretting, it's creating a counterforce that will kind of block that from continuing to grow or even potentially ripening into its result. The fourth of these is the kind of refraining from negativity, saying, we will not engage in those actions again for some period of time. Some we may be able to dedicate ourselves to refraining from forever, through this life, hopefully even beyond, but at least through this life. saying, I will never kill another sentient being again intentionally. That's a very strong one. If you can make that, affirmation, then do that as part of your refraining from negativities in the future. But if you can't make that, then at least refrain from the action for some period of time. And then the next day, if you were able to hold that period of time, maybe extend it a bit and extend it a bit until you feel comfortable saying that you will never engage in these intentional actions again. So again, let's look at the verse or the section. It does include the verse from the King of Prayers. That is part of, again, the seven limb prayer that occurs at the beginning of that text. It says here, the confession of bad actions is set forth in the stanza from the King of Prayers. I confess each and every one of the negative actions I have done with my body, speech, and mind, influenced by desire, hatred, and ignorance. So again, the three doors of body, speech, and mind, we often refer to our actions as being committed through one of those, but mind is always there. Our mind is what causes us to say non-virtuous things or engage in non-virtuous physical actions with our body. But nonetheless, any of them, sometimes they're just purely mental. So we can bring all those to mind and then influenced by desire, hatred, and ignorance. These are the three poisons. We'll see them in more detail when we get to the kind of second part of part two, the latter part where we work with the person of middling capacity and the teachings that are kind of shared with those beings. Continuing, it says, depending on the cause, the three poisons, and by means of the three bases, or three doors, we sometimes refer to them as body, speech, and mind, their nature is that I have done them, that is, that I have actually created them. I have made others create them. Sometimes we are the impetus for others to engage in those actions. And I have rejoiced in those created by others. This is also this kind of taking delight in the non-virtues of others is a very negative action to do because it is bringing joy into our minds, thinking about sentient beings suffering and what have you. Then it says here, all of which is generally subsumed. Oh, I need to create the larger screen. Sorry. Is generally subsumed under I have done, meaning like you have kind of regretted those. If through recollecting their faults you regret those done previously and sincerely confess them with the intention to abstain from them in the future, you stop the increase of deeds done in the past and stop committing them in the future. So we kind of see there's both those aspects to it, the looking back on the past and regretting those things and purifying them through this process of the opponent powers. But then in that last opponent power, having a purifying effect on our future actions, where we look at the idea of we're not going to commit those again to the best of our ability. So I don't need to say too much more about confession. You can do a kind of a practice of confession at that time if you wish. There's the confession of downfalls to the 35 Buddhas that involves some prostrations, and that's even mentioned in some texts as a practice that you could insert here, or you could insert Vajrasattva if you wish. But again, most of us do Vajrasattva as part of a separate practice or some other purification practice, so it's not necessary. But have some sort of thoughts with the four opponent powers as you do that limb of confessing. Rejoicing. Rejoicing is kind of looking at the positive things. In confessing, we're looking at the bad actions and negative deeds that we've done. Here, we're looking at the positive deeds that we and others have done and bringing joy to mind. Here it says, rejoicing is set forth in the stanza. I rejoice in all the merit, whatever it may be, of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, Bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, those with more to learn, which are kind of, again, the those that are not on the path of no more learning, meaning they haven't actualized their result of foe destroyer, and those with no more to learn, which have actualized the state of foe destroyer, and all ordinary beings. So they kind of have these more elevated beings, certainly Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. The Pratyeka Buddhas, again, are these solitary realizers, and they and the hearers, or Shravakas, are the two types of practitioners in the Hinayana path, the individual vehicle. I mentioned them previously, but just to remind you. And again, you have those that are still on the learning path that have not yet attained their result, and those who have attained their result with no more to learn in respective to their path. And then everyone else is an ordinary being. We're all the ones that are not on the path yet, not yet a bodhisattva, not yet any of these other practitioners of the individual vehicle. So, as you recall the benefits of the virtue of the five types of persons, you cultivate joy. So, the footnote here, I think, pertains to those five types of persons. According to this text, they are the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, again, Pratyeka Buddhas, which are the solitary realizers, and then Shravakas, the hearers, and then ordinary beings. So again, this kind of encompasses the main holy beings. Of course, again, some of them within the Pratyeka Buddhas and Shravakas could be on the learning path. Some could be on the path of no more learning, be an arhat, as it said, the foe destroyers. Buddhas and bodhisattvas, well, if you're a bodhisattva, you're on the learning path necessarily. When you stop your learning and become a Buddha, then you move to that category. So essentially, you have Buddhas and bodhisattvas, and then solitary realizers and hearers of both types, both those on the path and those who have achieved the state of arhat, and then ordinary beings. Those are the five. Let me share a slide that pertains to this. So yeah, I think that's, with those five types of persons, you cultivate joy. Anyway, let's go to the slides that I have open here and share a little bit more about rejoicing. Because there are teachings that show kind of what is the merit that we gain by rejoicing. It's not kind of a one-for-one thing necessarily. This is from Geshe Sopa's commentary on the Great Treatise. In another sutra, Maitreya said that theoretically, the weight of the whole universe is a measurable quantity, but the merit that results from admiring and rejoicing in all the virtues of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas, and all other beings, again, ordinary beings, as well as in your own virtues, which would be included in one of those categories too, is beyond measure. It is said that if you rejoice in the merit of those on a lower spiritual level than yourself, which we don't necessarily know, right? We might assume on the basis of whatever knowledge we have, but if it's someone lower than you, you will accumulate twice the amount of merit that they acquire from their virtuous actions. If you rejoice in the merit of someone equal to yourself, then you accumulate the same amount of merit. You kind of have the same positive potential in your continuum as what they have generated through their actions. It's very powerful then to rejoice, right? Because in some cases it's twice, in some cases it's equal. Well, there are some cases where it's less than what those beings accumulated. That is in this case. And if it is someone higher than yourself, of a greater spiritual status than yourself, you will accumulate half as much merit. Of course, you should also rejoice in your own virtues. And when you rejoice in your own virtues, it does kind of cause an increase to some degree. You should recall the virtues you created in the past and those you are creating in the present and rejoice. So often we do start with ourselves when we do this practice, rejoicing in our own merits, then rejoicing in those of other ordinary beings, rejoicing in the hearers and solitary realizers, those on the learning and non-learning path, and then the bodhisattvas, and then the Buddhas. And of course, the crown jewel of the Buddhas, as we saw when we looked at this topic, was the gurus. So the gurus are, the thing that we want to kind of end up with and rejoice the most in, because those gurus are a very important status for us. We'll see this too when we talk about karma. This is the most powerful object that we have in our spiritual life. Again, and we already went through the reasoning, the logic, explaining how we can see those beings as Buddhas, as being Buddhas. So let's go to the text again and carry on with the other limbs. The next limb, the fifth limb, is requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma. Now, again, on my chart, I think there's different orders for these, sometimes in the prayer, but you have two requests or supplications. The first one that's here is to turn the wheel of Dharma. You recognize that the Dharma is an important part of your life and something that you have great confidence in. So you want it to continue to be in this world and in all worlds as much as possible. So this stanza from King of Prayers in regard to that says, I implore all the protectors, lights of the world in the 10 directions, who have reached Buddhahood, which is without attachment, to turn the peerless wheel of the teaching. So this is the thought you want to have is, please, please keep the Dharma wheel turning, keep the Dharma teachings coming, because sentient beings need that medicine. And so we want to make sure that we're never parted from it and all beings are never parted from it. Very powerful prayer that we make in that supplication or request. It says there then, emanating the same number of bodies, many, many, many bodies, as many as you can, you exhort those who have awoken to complete Buddhahood in the fields of the 10 directions, those who have found unobstructed exalted knowledge free of attachment, to teach the Dharma as soon as possible. Now, they often say, it says same number of bodies, but I've often heard the instruction, I think I have it in my chart, that you should actually visualize yourself as a god of the Brahma realm. After the Buddha attained enlightenment, as Prince Siddhartha, which again, in the Mahayana perspective, this was all sort of a show. It was an exhibition of what are called the 12 deeds of a supreme emanation body, a supreme, appearance of the Buddha in this world. So essentially, though, when what happened was after he attained enlightenment, the story is that he wandered for some weeks, I think like 7 weeks or something, and he was kind of challenged to would sentient beings be able to discern this truth that he had found? Of course, it's all a show. Like I said, in the Mahayana perspective, this is an enlightened being just showing that aspect. But the Brahma gods appeared and they beseeched the Buddha to turn the wheel of Dharma. And he said there are some of those whose obscurations, the veil of ignorance is not so thick, and that they would actually be receptive to the teaching. So that's where he gave his first discourse to the 5 ascetics that he was practicing with prior to his attainment of enlightenment, who he left behind. But when they saw him, of course, they could see there was something very different about him, and he sat them down in Deer Park and gave his very first discourse. So when we're making this request, it's good to visualize ourselves as those Brahma gods, these divine beings who are asking the enlightened ones, the Buddhas, making this offering. They often say that you should visualize offering the Dharma chakra. Dharma chakra, sometimes they have like 8 spokes on them that symbolize the Eightfold Noble Path. But they say to visualize like a 1,000 spoked Dharma wheel, a sort of golden wheel that has jewels embedded in it. Make it as beautiful as you wish. And every form of you as a Brahma god is offering to the Buddha and all the holy beings, the enlightened beings, that same Dharma chakra, each of them holding one and offering it to the Buddhas. And what happens from there, I've never really heard anything like, they must accept the offering. I mean, that's a good part of this, is that when you have offered something like that, it's good to think that the Buddhas have accepted it. But where it goes from there, I usually like to visualize it going into their throat area, because again, that's what is used to say the teachings, to disseminate the teachings. But I haven't really heard definitive word on that. So do what you wish with the visualization of the Dharma chakra. But again, you'll see that that is also on the chart here, offering a beautiful Dharma chakra. Again, and I didn't put the part there about, with yourself visualized as a Brahma god. The next one, the supplication to remain, this too accumulates merit, and it's offering a golden lion throne, as they're called, these snow lions that 2 at each corner of a 4-cornered throne that are holding it aloft. So those 8 snow lions are all there, kind of raising up the throne in a sense, so that the Buddha is elevated. But you're going to be offering countless golden lion thrones with yourself visualized in countless forms that are all sending forth those as a way of kind of embodying your supplication for the Buddhas to remain, give them a seat that they can sit on, essentially. And so anyway, those all are, the instruction there is that those all do absorb into the throne that the Buddha is seated upon at the end of that, and that represents their acceptance of the request to remain. Well, let's look at the supplication verse that's from the King of Prayers. I supplicate with palms joined in prayer, those wishing to demonstrate their final nirvana, what's called kind of the parinirvana. The Buddhas, like Buddha Shakyamuni, at the end of his teaching career, and when the time was sort of right, demonstrated this idea of passing into nirvana. But Buddhas will not pass into final nirvana in the sense of never being part of the world suffering and addressing it again. They definitely want to kind of keep that all going. So they could demonstrate their final nirvana because they have attained the final result. There's no more learning required. But, we want to make this supplication from our side so that we continue to have Buddhas in our lives and in the lives of beings as well. So not just to turn the Dharma, wheel of Dharma, but to remain, until samsara is emptied. As it says here, please stay as many eons as there are atoms to benefit and bring happiness to all beings. Okay. So it then says, supplicate those throughout the 10 directions who show how to pass beyond sorrow to remain, not passing into nirvana, for as many eons as the number of fine dust particles there are in the universe, in order to bring about the benefit and happiness of sentient beings. Again, sometimes this line says, to not pass away until samsara is emptied. I pull up the prayer that I had on that sheet for you, and I think that's the case. Is that it usually says something along those lines. So it says here, please remain until should say until samsara ends. I don't know why it says the samsara. That looks kind of weird to me. I may have made an error when I put that on this sheet, but anyway, this is again the prayer that you have in the practice prayers that I've given to you that you can use. I hope it's not wrong there too, but anyway. So again, 5 and 6 are in a different order here, but that's the one that we're working with there. The last limb, the limb of dedication, is how we kind of multiply our merit, by dedicating it with this very strong virtuous thought and then making it inexhaustible. In other words, by dedicating, we're assuring that that merit will ripen into the results that we seek, which is Buddhahood, which is inexhaustible. When you become a Buddha, it's not like you lose merit. Your merit is like a perpetual source that will continue to ripen into your being of benefit to all beings. And so it's inexhaustible in that way. Um, then there is the what we do there essentially is dedicating any of our present and past merits. Um, and so the idea behind that is, again, when we dedicate, we seal those and we create some sort of boundary around them, assuring that they're going to ripen into the result that we were motivated to achieve at the beginning. That's why we dedicate at the end of every class, right? Okay, so the limb of dedication that is set forth in the stanza from the King of Prayers. Whatever little merit I have accumulated by prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and supplicating, in other words, the other 6 limbs, as well as all the other merit that we've accumulated, I dedicate it all to enlightenment, my own enlightenment, the enlightenment of all beings. What's sometimes referred to as the great enlightenment, all beings in that state. All the roots of virtue represented by the previous 6 limbs are made the common property of all sentient beings and never come to an end, since they have been dedicated with strong aspiration as causes of complete enlightenment. Because again, when you become a Buddha, they're inexhaustible. They will continue to carry forward in the actions, activities of that Buddha. If you thus develop an understanding of the meaning of those words and slowly do as was taught without allowing your mind to wander, you will gather immeasurable heaps of merit. Okay. Now, this is a little summary of sort of what the limbs, how they kind of fit into a category of 3 different things. Remember, I mentioned that it's primarily accumulating merit and making purification of negativities, but there's also a sort of kind of what's the word for it? Kind of another extension of accumulating merit that is the 3rd of these. So let's look at this paragraph. 5 of these limbs, prostrating, offering, requesting, supplicating, and rejoicing, belong to the collection of accumulations because that is what we're mainly doing, is accumulating merit through those activities. Confessing, the 3rd limb, purifies obstructions. That's the purification limb, right, for that activity. Now, one aspect of rejoicing, the cultivation of joy in one's own virtue, multiplies your own virtue. Whereas again, you're accumulating when you rejoice in the virtues of others because you're accumulating merit that is theirs that you are getting kind of a match to. They get their merit and you get your merit from rejoicing. Again, at those different percentages of twice or equal amount or half the merit, depending upon whether they're lower, equal, or higher in regard to their spiritual attainments. And by means of dedicating, the virtues of collecting, purifying, and multiplying, however small, are multiplied manifoldly. And what would normally come to an end after producing a temporary effect is made inexhaustible. So, in brief, in that way, there are the three: accumulating, that first set of five; purifying, the third one, confessing; and then multiplying and making inexhaustible, which is a portion of the rejoicing, as well as the dedication, which multiplies and makes inexhaustible. Whereas that one portion of our rejoicing in our own merits, multiplies our merit. So that encompasses all seven then. All right. Then let's go to this last of the preliminary practices. Sixth, as for the final preparatory practice, with the clear visualization of the objects, offer a mandala, and with strong aspiration make numerous requests. Please grant blessings that all erroneous attitudes, such as disrespecting the spiritual teacher, because again, this is in the context of this practice being set out pertaining to that first topic that we already looked at, relying upon the spiritual teacher correctly. So we're especially thinking about that. Please grant blessings that all those erroneous attitudes, such as disrespecting the spiritual teacher, may cease, and that all the non-erroneous attitudes toward the spiritual teacher may come about with ease. By the way, that little mark that I have on mandala, that's something just to remind me that on chart 4 of that set of charts from the basic program at Institute Lama Tsongkhapa, there's the various objects, because it did say there, of clear visualization of the objects. I'll go to that in a moment. Anyway, at the bottom of the screen there, it says, I request blessings that all outer and inner obstacles, may be pacified. Okay, so this is again, there's a full kind of prayer of the three purposes that is sometimes done that includes these various aspects to it. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But essentially, this last limb involves kind of a offering of this vast, purified visualization of the entire phenomenal world. And it's the kind of format for it is based upon Buddhist cosmology, which has its roots, as I understand, in Hindu cosmology in terms of the various god realms and what have you. But essentially, there's in all of the mandalas, there's a central thing that is Mount Meru, this mythical kind of massive mountain that's at the center of the universe. And then around it are various objects. The prayer that we do at the beginning of the class, the mandala offering, is the shortest one. It's 7 heaps, 7 different objects. It is Mount Meru, the sun and the moon, which in this Buddhist cosmology, they're not out there in Earth rotating. Instead, they rotate around Mount Meru. And so they give us the, days and nights and what have you on the basis of that. Again, this is, His Holiness has often said that if we see things in Buddhist cosmology or any other teachings that are disproven by science, we have to believe what science says. But my teacher in Italy, Geshe Jampa Gyatso, when he was talking about this kind of view of the world in Buddhist cosmology, which we studied rather extensively when we were in the course on the Abhidharma Kosha of Vasubandhu, he said that, you have to be careful because we don't know whose reality that is. I mean, we have a reality of this universe with things, working in particular ways, but in someone else's universe, some other realm of beings, that may be what actually exists, So don't, kind of discount these things. It's a visualization that we can do of, again, Mount Meru, the sun and moon. Then there are 4 continents. The 4 continents are in the north, south, east, and west, and essentially we are on one of those continents. They say on this planet Earth. So those are the only ones that are visualized in the 7. Let me go ahead and share that handout so you can take a look at it. Again, it was chart 4 in that set of charts. These nice colorful charts that someone very creative put together for us. Thank you very much for doing that. There are what are called the 37 heaps or, components, objects, the 25 heaps, the 23 heaps, and then the 7 heaps. And so you can take a look at these, and it goes through all the various objects, the treasures. There are subcontinents, by the way, besides the continents. There are signs of royalty, the precious royal emblems, the treasure vase, offering goddesses, and the sun and moon, and then the parasol and victory banner. So again, these are just a way of embodying our entire phenomenal universe and trying to visualize it in the format of this, uh, Buddhist cosmology, and then making an offering. Now, some of these, you can do any of these with the base. You can certainly visualize them, but you can also do them with the base and the rings. Most of you have seen these before. Sometimes they're on the altars in some of our centers, but there is like a base that is sort of like a hollowed ring, but with a base on top of it. And then that is what you start everything from. And there's a whole process for doing the mandala offerings of, purifying it and so on. Then you place a ring and you put all these stones and grains and whatever on top of that to fill that ring. And then you do the visualization of the next thing that comes up, and the next, there's either 3 or 4 levels, depending upon what mandala offering you're doing and how many rings your set has. And then there's a Dharma chakra that goes on the very top. And it's a very powerful practice to do. I remember when I was doing some of them, I felt like I needed something a little more kinesthetic to work with in my practice. And it was really quite wonderful to do. I enjoyed that practice a lot. But anyway, then I simply didn't have the time to keep up with it. But it's a wonderful way to, again, embody the whole idea of a mandala. So you can use the longer prayer, the prayer of the 37 heaps, if you're going to offer that with your mandala set, or whatever the case might be. But again, it's like trying to make the biggest offering that you can. Not think in terms of, oh, I'm just going to offer this or that, or some nice things. We did that as part of the offering prayer, right? Various objects that we could think about to offer. But here we're thinking about the entire universe, everything that exists, kind of manifesting as this, purified realm, this realm of these various aspects of Buddhist cosmology. So it's something that, again, you can find various instructions on the practice of it. But yeah, the FPMT used to have a booklet on it, but I don't think it has it right now. Okay, so actually, this is back on the requesting to turn the Wheel of Dharma. I realize that I've been neglecting my slides. I went to them earlier. But this is some advice from Pabanka Rinpoche. He says, when you request the turning of the wheel of Dharma, remember that when you were offering the Dharma chakra. And if you have a mandala set, arrange 9 handfolds on the base and visualize all this as a 1,000-spoke golden wheel while making the request. You could even visualize yourself as the great Brahma. Now, I'm not sure. I've never heard an explanation of why the 9 handfuls. Maybe you're putting 1 in the center and then 8 in a circle around it. So it's sort of like this, the hub of the wheel and then the individual spikes. But I have not, again, heard much commentary on that. But as he said there, you can visualize yourself as the great Brahma, this God that is making requests. And then it says, then emanate numberless replicas of yourself, which go out to the Buddhas in the 10 directions. If this is beyond you, you could emanate a replica of yourself for each member of the merit field. And if even this proves too much, just imagine that one of you offers a wheel to them. Very kind of Pabanka Rinpoche to allow us to, work with whatever our capacities are. Then in regard to that supplication to remain that I mentioned just a short while ago here, you should put 5 handfuls on your mandala base and imagine it to be a Vajra throne. Oh, that was one aspect I forgot to mention. Yeah, they do say it should be like a double Vajra throne, which most of you have seen. They're like the 2 Vajras, those implements that are used in Tantra that are joined together at the center of each of them so that you have 4 spokes around them in a sense, but the 5th is the what's in the middle. It says, or you could imagine you offer a Vajra throne, a throne that is adorned with that Vajra for each member of the merit field. Or if you cannot manage this, only 1 Vajra throne that dissolves into the merit field's throne. So again, you can have some liberty to not visualize everything there either. But again, there's a Vajra throne because with the five-spoke Vajra, it's like this essentially. So you're going to put probably, I'm assuming, one pile of sand in the middle or grains or whatever, and then one at each of the peaks, the tips of each of that. So that represents again the five-spoke Vajra. Okay, let's go back to that. I may have another slide or so in regard to the mandala offering. Oh, limb of dedication, sorry. Okay, let's go through this. Why not? I decided I was going to put it in there for when I put these notes together. So there are 6 points to be made here. What is being dedicated? Your root virtues. Why do you dedicate them? So that they will not run out. To what end do you dedicate them? To your supreme enlightenment. For, for whose sake do you dedicate them? For the sake of all sentient beings, so they can benefit from dedicating for your enlightenment. When in that state, you can then help them all. 2 more points. Number 5, how do you dedicate them? As it says in the ornament to realization, through method and right perception. In other words, you perform the dedication with the sort of thinking that combines method and wisdom by having, for instance, the right perception of the three components of the act of dedication. This is what's often called kind of seeing the three spheres: the person who is giving, the act of giving itself, and the object that is receiving that. Those three spheres are all meant to be seen as empty of inherent existence, the truth of reality that we'll be looking at much later in this course. But nonetheless, that's the perception you want to have from the wisdom side, to make sure that you're not clinging to any of that as existing inherently. You think about the emptiness of those three objects, and you combine the method aspect of offering it. So again, that is the thing being dedicated, the end to which it is dedicated, and the beings for whose sake this is being done all lack inherent existence. So it's slightly different than what I said. Usually they talk about the three spheres as being the person who is dedicating, the object that is being dedicated, and then the recipients of those. I guess, yeah, they're the beings for whose sake it's being done. But here it's also thinking about the emptiness of the end to which it is dedicated. In other words, complete enlightenment. Okay. It doesn't matter. You think about the emptiness of everything. As Rinpoche would often say, we can plug that in any prayer of dedication so that we aren't clinging to those merits or the act of dedicating or ourselves or the state of enlightenment and any of these things as existing inherently. Goes on to say this prevents you from clinging to the thing being dedicated as if it were established as true. The 6th point, the nature of the dedication. It is done in conjunction with the wish that your root virtues may not disappear. Do it together with the wish that those virtues held will change into the cause for your complete enlightenment. Again, so that's the intention. That's the nature of our dedication. They become inexhaustible. They don't disappear, and they will become the cause for complete enlightenment of ourselves so we can benefit others. Okay, there is this prayer that I mentioned of the three purposes, and sometimes it's inserted in the prayers, and I think I have it in the practice that I'm encouraging you to do, or the prayers that I want you to do, if possible, with your Lamrim meditation, though you can use other prayers if you wish. This is also from Pavanka Rinpoche. He says if you're going to ask for something vitally important from a great king, for example, you must first give him a huge gift. We want to ask the merit field for 3 vitally important things, so we should offer a mandala. These 3 great things are not for our own benefit, having a long life, good health, and the like. So again, these are not just for our own benefit, they're for the greater benefit of benefiting all beings. Okay, so first, one of these 3 is for us to stop having any sort of wrong thought, such as disrespect for our spiritual guide, or any of the points that are contrary to what we're trying to realize in the Lamrim. Again, he's talking about the first topic here because this whole presentation, as I said earlier, is being made after having gone through the first topic. It says, okay, then how do you meditate on devoting yourself to a spiritual guide? Well, this is how you do it. So that's why it's being mentioned here more specifically, but it is often included in that prayer as the starting point, and then all the way up through any obstacles we might have, any wrong thoughts in regard to the highest teachings, even of Tantra. Second, Another of these three is to enable us to develop all right thoughts, all the correct understandings and the correct views that the Buddha is trying to convey to us in these teachings assembled as the Lamrim. And three, the third, is having our internal and external hindrances pacified. We all have obstacles, hindrances, and we want that to be part of our request as well. But again, we want that out of our lives, not because we don't want to suffer from any of those things, so that we don't have anything that will prevent us from becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. Then, from the tantric point of view, we should rather say from having disrespect for our spiritual guides to our having even the subtlest dualistic appearances that occur during the white appearances, red increase, and black attainment phases. Those of you who've studied the death process know that these are the subtle minds that appear according to the teachings in Tantra before the mind of clear light manifests at death. But anyway, it's just saying that you should include kind of that tantric perspective that we want to even remove or have, an ability to be free of the very subtle obscurations of the dualistic appearance that occur during those. These again all occur just before that clear light state. So the text we use for the preparatory rites does not actually say this after the words from having disrespect for our spiritual guides, but Pavanka Rinpoche says, I think we may substitute this tantric version for the words that follow. They say there's nothing dharmic that cannot be included within the above three things. Again, having everything kind of manifest for us in terms of getting the right realizations, being free of the wrong thoughts, and having no hindrances. All right. Okay, so now those hindrances that are mentioned, they're as follows. Outer hindrances, external hindrances to practice are wars, kings persecuting the Dharma, and so on. Anything outside of ourselves that can act as an obstacle, a hindrance to our ability to make good use of this life and practice Dharma. Inner hindrances are illness and so on. There's even a category sometimes called secret hindrances, which are our mind's inability to make use of the Dharma, or they're not yet being fit for this. Sometimes our minds need more conditioning to be able to utilize the Dharma and have good progress in our development of realizations. All right. That's enough on that. That's all that I wanted to say. But it's interesting in our text. Let's go back to our text for this last little bit of that one. You'll see that it just ends there after saying, this is the request. It's important to kind of understand that you have the mandala offering with requests, and you can make other requests. This is part of, again, the prayer that is often done with the mandala offering. But nonetheless, you can make requests. Like say you are having difficulty in realizing a particular topic or challenges in your own study. I just can't figure out what emptiness is all about and really having some blocks. Well, you can make more specific requests as part of this. Let me pull up. I actually didn't do that before. We can do that on here. Let me go to where I have the prayers that I'm encouraging you to do, the Lamrim prayers to do with the Lamrim. Where did I put that? Yeah, recommended prayers. All right, let me make that larger and then I'll put it on the screen. Okay, so again, I've given you these prayers to do that embody a lot of the practices that we're talking about, and you're welcome to use these. But as I said, if you have another practice that you do, you're welcome to use those. They start with refuge in bodhicitta and the four immeasurable thoughts. The four immeasurable thoughts can be seen as part of our prayers we do with refuge in bodhicitta to bring those four very kind of positive qualities to mind of immeasurable equanimity, love, compassion, and joy. Then again, there was the seven limb prayer, and this is the same version. As you'll see, it does say, please remain until samsara ends. I don't know why it says, I think it's maybe initially it said, please remain until the end of psychic existence, and I forgot to remove the. Anyway, I'll remove that. Here's the mandala offering prayer that we use at the beginning of class, and the prayer of the three great purposes. So as it says there, I go for refuge to the Guru and the three precious rare sublime jewels. Please bless my mental continuum. So then we have the three requests. Please grant me blessings to cease immediately all wrong conceptions from incorrect devotion to the Guru up to, this is the tantric version, the subtle dual view of the white appearance, red increase, and black near attainment. Those are the three subtler states of mind that occur after the breathing has stopped at death, and they are the subtle minds that precede the mind of clear light. So there's still some dualistic obscuration with regard to those. So those are like the subtlest obscurations we have in our mind. Secondly, please grant me blessings to actualize immediately all the correct realizations from Guru devotion, correctly devoting to the Guru, up to the unification of no more learning, the unification that occurs on the path of Buddhahood, all the way to that most virtuous result and nothing beyond it. There's no more learning after that. That's the second request. The third, please pacify immediately all outer and inner obstacles or hindrances. So you make this request as part of offering the mandala and visualizing that vast pure offering, and then you do this little idam guru ratna mandalakam niryatayami, which essentially means, to you, my precious Guru, I make this vast pure offering, this mandala offering. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, that's what I was referring to when I was talking about that. Let's go back to our text. We are now, having finished the preliminary practices, the preparatory practices, we are going on to talk about what happens during the actual meditation session. Oops, sorry. The actual meditation session is the middle part, right? There are always three parts to what we do, at least. There's the preparation, which would include some level of motivation, as well as all that we're doing. Then we have the actual practice, and then we have the closing at the end, the dedication, and so on. So this has 2 points: what to do during the actual meditation session, how to practice meditation in general, and how to practice this meditation in particular. What meditation are they talking about? Again, it's the meditation on the spiritual teacher and devoting ourselves to the spiritual guide. First, how to practice meditation in general. Meditation on a path like the one explained below is to render the mind suitable for attending to a virtuous object just as one wishes. So again, I think the idea of it being explained below, we're going to talk about kind of those different types of meditation shortly, but eventually we are going to get to the instruction on how to make our minds suitable for attending to any virtuous object that we wish, in the way that we would ideally like to be able to keep our minds present on it for as long as we wish. He goes on to say, if you jump from object to object to sustain your interest, or you pursue a variety of virtuous objects in no particular order, nothing will come of it. And having gone wrong from the beginning, your spiritual practice will continue to be faulty throughout your life. So he's pointing out another fault that we have, besides not getting the mind kind of suitable for meditation. If we instead just start meditating on this and that in a real kind of haphazard way of I'm going to go to teachings on karma, and then I'm going to go look at emptiness, and then I'm going to go look at bodhicitta, and then I'm going to go look at the spiritual guide, and then I'm going to go look at refuge, and then I'm going to look at, we're all over the place. So we're not putting them in the correct order. There's going to be challenges in attaining realizations because they are set out in the gradual order that we need to really inform our practice. Again, it's not to say that the teachings we have at the lower level are completely abandoned when we get to the higher level, because things like refuge and karma continue to be relevant as we move through the path. But nonetheless, the way they're presented in the Lamrim, it does require that we take them one at a time in that stepped order, gradual order. So this is another point that's being made, is that we can't just go, all over the place meditating on this and that and expect that we're really going to kind of do the trick. Down at the very bottom, it says, therefore, you should first determine the number and order of objects to be attended to. Then you should unleash a strong resolve that does not permit the advent of thoughts that draw you away from what has been ascertained. Finally, you should sustain with mindfulness and vigilance or introspection what has been ascertained without addition or omission. So essentially what he's saying here is, again, we have to have kind of an understanding of the topics as they are set out. That's what we're doing in this course, and what we do in any Lamrim course is to understand the sequence and the teachings within each of these particular topics, so that we then have the content of our meditation. And then we have this strong resolve that won't permit thoughts that are contrary to that to draw us away from what we are ascertaining in this process of learning the stages of the path and meditating on them and eventually realizing them. And as we're doing that, we need to sustain with these two factors what has been ascertained without addition or omission. We don't need to throw anything else in there, and we certainly can't leave anything out, right? So I want to just talk briefly about these two factors. They're going to come up again shortly in regard to what we do between sessions, but the idea is that vigilance and mindfulness often are working in tandem. Mindfulness is, in this context, our non-forgetfulness with regard to what it is that we are focusing on, the object of our meditation. So when we're going to see this division into analytical and stabilizing meditation shortly. But if we're analyzing a topic like devoting to the spiritual guide, and we are kind of getting to a point and say we do that meditation, the 4 points that I've talked about, presented to you in regard to why we can see our gurus as a Buddha. If we get in any one of those topics to some understanding and a feeling that we are following a Buddha, that our guru is actually an enlightened being, well, then we want to, kind of hold on to that. And throughout the meditation, we want to have a mindfulness that is constantly aware of what it is that we are attending to. That mindfulness is what keeps you from wandering away from that, from not holding on to that. And of course, how we ascertain whether our mindfulness is still in place is through the force of introspection. As we'll see in one of the slides later tonight, I think we'll get to it. Running out of time already, it seems hard to believe, but anyway, introspection is like a spy in the corner of our minds, sort of checks in and sees the quality of our meditation. And so essentially we need this to be there occasionally. You don't want it there all the time, because it becomes a bit of an obstacle. If you're constantly checking things, you're never really with the object with your mindfulness. But this is checking up to see what the quality of our meditation is and whether we are remembering the object, whether we are present with that. Of course, we need those two factors off the cushion too. We're going to see them applied there. And we're going to see both of these really talked about in much, much greater detail in the final part of this entire course when we talk about how we develop shamatha, calm abiding, this very powerful mind that was mentioned at the beginning of that paragraph in that section, where we are able to abide on the object that we wish for as long as we wish. And then finally, it says there you should sustain, with those factors, what has been ascertained. So you have to keep your mindfulness of those. You don't let them wane, and you try to incorporate them into your understanding so that you live from that place. Again, without adding or in any way, omitting anything that is part of that path. That's the first topic, kind of the general advice that's being given around how to practice meditation. And those are the just basic factors. We're going to go into more detail shortly in regard to the different types of meditation that we want to engage in. How to practice this meditation in particular, the one on the spiritual guide. First, contemplate the benefits of reliance upon the spiritual teacher and the faults of not relying correctly. We talked about those. They were presented in that chapter of Lama Tsongkhapa's text. Then repeatedly resolve to never permit your awareness to get caught up in conceiving faults in the Guru, and instead recall the excellent qualities, such as those that are among the 10 that we had on our list of ideal qualities for a Guru: ethics, concentration, so on, that you yourself have perceived in them. Whoever our guru is, we want to think about those qualities and never, have a mind that is focusing and dwelling on the faults, right? Cultivate the faith that has the aspect of mental clarity until it arises. At some point, I'm sure we'll touch on faith in more detail. Faith in Buddhism has 3 different dimensions, and it's essentially to help us to get to a level of deeper conviction. Faith is not blind faith, but rather a conviction that the teachings are true for us on the basis of our own investigation and experience. But here we're talking about what's often called clear faith. This is a clear faith that is seeing these things clearly. It is actually understanding them through our meditation so that we have a faith in them just through that clarity of how they are appearing to us. All right. Then contemplate, in accordance with the above quotations from the sutras, which we saw in that section, that chapter on the spiritual guide, the instances of beneficial kindness that you have received and still receive, and from the depth of your heart, cultivate respect until it arises. So, this is again just the general advice about how to attend to that. What I thought we would do here, and I know I'm inserting more stuff here, but I did tell you that I think on this section I'm going to take a little more time on. We did have two extra classes for catching up, and I think we'll use at least one of those in this section going through this part on the meditation session itself. But as it says there, for more on the meditation on the spiritual teacher, see part 2 of how to meditate on the stages of the path to enlightenment, that text by Pabanka Rinpoche that I allowed you to have a copy of. That's from the Discovering Buddhism. It's something that I would like you to take a look at, and hopefully you've listened to some of the teachings that I've done on that text in terms of how to attain realizations. Not that you could listen to other people's teachings too. I'm just saying I offered them to you as something that you could listen to if you wish. But let's go ahead and go to that document. I have it pulled up here, and I have it in that section. Again, I said pages 61 through 63. It's only itself like a 17-page document because it's taken out of a larger set of readings that are for Module 8 of Discovering Buddhism. So in the first part of it, it talked all about gaining different levels of realizations, including what are called experiential realizations, where we actually have a taste of these teachings at a much deeper level. So I'm just going to touch on this briefly. It says here, instructions on how to develop the spiritual realizations associated with properly serving a spiritual teacher. So Pabanka Rinpoche says, now that I've instructed you on how to carry out properly the key elements involved in practicing analytic meditation, and I advise you again to look through those in that first part of this document. And if you wish, listen to the teachings that I gave on that document, a few years back. What is the first topic to which you should apply analytic meditation, and how should you apply it? Okay. Analytic meditation, he says, need not be applied to the 3 introductory topics. Remember those 3 we looked at shortly after we started this text, right? The greatness of the originator of this Dharma teaching, Tisha, the greatness of the teaching itself, the Dharma, and then the correct method of listening to and teaching the Dharma. We went through all of those before we went to the topic of the Guru and relating to the spiritual friend. The preliminary practices, sorry, I went too far down. We also need not meditate on the preliminary practices and so on. Therefore, the practice of analytic meditation should begin with the topic of how to serve a spiritual teacher. I mean, you do the preliminary practices as part of your meditation session, as your preparatory practices, but the main thing you're going to meditate on is the first of these topics of the Lamrim, which is, again, dedicating ourselves correctly to our spiritual teachers. Then it says if you contemplate skillfully for about 7 days, and here's the assumption is that you're going to be meditating on that fairly frequently over those 7 days, like maybe up to 4 sessions a day, the benefits of serving a teacher, and for about 7 days also the faults of failing to serve a teacher, you will produce a mental transformation, which in the footnote it says is equivalent to this experiential realization, something that is still conceptual for us, but it starts to change our hearts, change our minds. The next topic is the root practice of cultivating faith, which is extremely important, but also difficult to realize because here we're talking about the faith that we have in our Guru as a Buddha. And then he goes on to say, yet no matter how many months or years it takes to complete, don't think that it's taking too long. Practice it one-pointedly until you succeed in eliciting that experiential realization, the mental transformation that is essential to cause our minds to shift. Moreover, if you contemplate too many points during a single period, your practice will become what we often call reflective or glance meditation, not analytic meditation. We want to take an individual point and really go deeply into it. So he says during each period, contemplate just one topic. For instance, and this is, again, let me move it up a little bit. For instance, make the topic number 4 of the 4 reasons why we can see our Guru as a Buddha, which, as I said, Lama Zopa Rinpoche said to reverse the order, right? So this would be actually in his recommendation, Rinpoche's recommendation, the last one we would meditate on. that Vajradhara affirm that our guru is a Buddha. When the Buddha taught the Tantras in the form of Vajradhara, one of the lines from the Tantras is that in the future, this is how the Buddha will appear, is as our gurus. So that's again the first of the four in this section. But the first that we would have is that we cannot trust our appearances. Our appearances are deceptive, which is how Rinpoche set them out, using the last one as the first. I think you all recall this from when I went through that a few sessions back. So that's the only one you wish to verify. So you start with just one reason, one thing that you're going to think about. And it says, then, with scripture and sharp reasonings as proof, apply yourself and contemplate this very topic for the entire period until you generate a sure understanding. Just as on the first day, cultivate this topic the next day and the next day after that. Cultivate it for a month and for a second month as well. Continue practicing this way until you elicit the true experiential awareness. When the experiential awareness emerges, then you switch to the next topic, which would be the second of the four. It's laid out here in the more traditional way, but then it says, after you've realized a topic, contemplate it with reflective meditation alone, where you're like reviewing it. You're not doing the full analytic meditation on it, but you're reviewing it to keep it fresh in your mind. However, don't move on to a later topic before you have gained realizations of those which precede it. Now, this is the general instruction. Most of us are at a point where we're just learning the landscape. And so we don't have to stop and just work with one topic for seemingly forever. We have an ability to go through them, to kind of learn the course, to be able to understand how the teachings of various topics flow one into the other. That's perfectly fine. But then when we get serious about it and we really want to gain realizations, well, then you have to stick with one and wait till you get that, and then you move on to the next topic. So the later topics, he says, cannot be realized before the earlier ones. Therefore, strive vigorously to elicit a realization of the initial topic, which in this case, again, is that first of the four reasons why we can see our guru as a Buddha. After eliciting an experiential realization of this topic, undertake to practice in a similar way the second one, that the guru is the agent for all the Buddha's activities. And then the third one, that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are still doing activities. And the last one, in that traditional presentation, was that our appearances are deceptive. We cannot trust our appearances. But again, Rinpoche said to reverse that order. After gaining a realization of that topic, go to the next one, that even nowadays all Buddhas act on behalf of sentient beings. Meditate by applying the intense analysis of scripture reasoning and your guru's instruction just as you cultivate this topic the first day. Continue doing so. So that's again just telling us what to do in terms of those various topics within this overall topic. The next day and the one after that, days, months, even years, you keep moving forward until you get the experiential realization. You must bring forth the realization which perceives that your guru is truly a Buddha. And since this very topic is much more crucial than all the others, devote yourself to it with great effort. And then, of course, you go on to the last of the four, that this would be the first one for us, according to Rinpoche. Our perceptions are unreliable. They're deceptive. Cultivate it by intensely applying the technique of analytic meditation. And when you have practiced this way, that should say and. I think it was a mistake when they read this in, not arid. Practice this way and truly perceive that your guru embodies the actual nature of all the Buddhas. And when all the Buddhas and your guru appear to merge as one, then you have generated the realization that relates to serving a spiritual teacher. Now, again, you would go on then to cultivate faith in regard to, after that, recalling the spiritual teacher's kindness, which was the other way of dedicating ourselves to the guru by way of our thoughts. And there were four topics under that were in the more traditional texts of like Bhavanka Rinpoche, but in our abbreviated middle-length Lamrim, those four weren't there, but they're in one of my slides anyway. You'll see that if you go back. But all right, it's kind of interesting. I just want to point this out. Maybe I won't use the text anymore because it's kind of a long time to have that text on the screen. But essentially what Bhavanka Rinpoche says at this point is that this realization of the guru as a Buddha, which is, again, a key one of this first topic, is extremely difficult to attain. Because actually at the very beginning of the Lamrim in this section, Bhavanka Rinpoche says there are two topics that are the most difficult. That's this one And secondly, seeing all sentient beings as having been your mother, which we know comes in the bodhicitta teachings, which will be in the third part of this course. So essentially, this is something we need time to generate. And so you might think, well, then I just have to keep working with that, and however long it takes, years or whatever, I'm just going to do it. Pavanka Rinpoche suggests a technique to gain kind of a deeper realization of it in tandem with the other topics. So even though our text said, don't kind of meditate on more than one thing or whatever. Pavanka Rinpoche says if you actually have three different meditation periods, in one of them you meditate on dedicating yourself to the Guru and thinking of the Guru as being a Buddha in that way. Secondly, you meditate on the other sequential topics of the Lamrim, such as the one we're going to go into when we finish this section on the meditation session, which is the precious nature of this human life that we have, the perfect qualities, and so on. So you would start there and you would work your way through all the other Lamrim topics that we're going to be covering. That's your second part of your meditation. If you have 3 sessions at least, I don't know if everyone has time for 3 meditation periods a day, but that's kind of the structure, at least to have some reflection on the Guru as a Buddha, some other Lamrim topic, and then lastly, a meditation on emptiness. Because emptiness, too, is a very difficult topic to realize. It isn't one of the two that Pavanka Rinpoche singled out. But as we know from our own teachings on emptiness and working with that topic, it's very difficult to realize. It takes a lot of analysis and single-pointed meditation on it and what have you. So that's kind of Pavanka Rinpoche's suggestion is you have 3 periods of the day where you use those in kind of a parallel track every day, meditating on all 3 of them, so that you kind of increase the strength of them together. They use the idea of 3 things that grow together, like you plant 3 seeds. And I don't remember what the 3 things are. They're in the text, but they're able to kind of intertwine and support each other and actually become, they get the fruits of all 3 of them together anyway. It's an idea, and it's something that you're worth exploring. But at this stage, as I said, most of you are probably simply wanting to know the stages of the path, and so you don't have to spend undue hours of meditation on one particular topic. Meditate on it as we go through the course. But I would encourage you to stay with the topics that we're meditating on as much as you can. We've had a fair amount of time that we've been working with the spiritual teacher, and then this whole section on the meditation session. So you'll have some time, where you can work with that topic and the other topics that are mentioned in there, benefits of devoting ourselves to a guru, disadvantages of not properly relying, those sorts of things. But again, this is something you can kind of have as something you want to do eventually. Eventually, it would be nice to structure, once you've got a deep understanding of the Lamrim, to be able to gain realizations in this way, to have 3 periods of the day where you are doing these different meditation topics. And again, I've got more information on that in that video, that the teaching that I did. But I wanted to at least touch on the spiritual teacher and what is presented there by Pavanka Rinpoche, so you kind of see how it works. I may not do that for all the other topics. One thing I might mention, that I do have a document out there that are some meditations. There's like 13 different meditations. Meditation 1 is a summary sheet of this. I think I pointed this out to you before, but know that you have right there on one page all the different benefits that Pavanka Rinpoche mentioned, the disadvantages of not properly relying, thinking about the Guru's good qualities, if you want to meditate on that, certainly. Also remembering the Guru's kindness, and again, there were 4 different topics for that in Pavanka Rinpoche's text. This one doesn't include the 4 reasons why you can see the Guru as a Buddha, but again, we went through those because, as I said, that wasn't even really included fully in the middle length Lamrim, but it's such an important topic, we had to spend some time on it. All right, so that's the instruction on how to meditate on this topic, meaning the one that we've gone through already, the first of the many topics of the Lamrim that are the subject of our Lamrim meditations. There'll be more on meditation when we get to the latter part of this chapter, but now we go to the third part of this presentation. We had what to do at the beginning, the preparatory practices, what the meditation, the actual session in the middle is like, and now what to do at the end. So by means of the prayer of good conduct, that's shorthand for the King of Prayers, because there's wonderful dedication verses in that text as well. Rather extensive, but you're welcome to use those or any other dedication prayers, or even the ones that I put together on that sheet that you can refer to when you're doing your Lamrim meditation. And also this aspiration in 70 verses, which I'm not sure, I'm really familiar with that text so much, but essentially there are different texts that have dedication prayers. There's a wonderful dedication chapter in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It's over almost 60 verses, I think, so it could take a while to recite that. But so by means of those, the virtue accumulated should be dedicated with strong aspiration to the temporary and ultimate aims. You should meditate like this in 4 sessions. At dawn, meaning just as the darkness is leaving and you're coming into daylight, and then in the morning, meaning before midday, before your midday meal, in the afternoon, which would be sometime in generally the latter part of the afternoon, and in the evening, which would be any time from, I don't know, say after dinner until midnight or so. In Buddhism, they often divide the day into 6 periods, each of 4 hours. And so they talk about the 3 during the day and the 3 at night. And again, it's not an equal 12-12 in terms of what is night and what is day, but that's the idea of it, is you divide your day up into 3 parts and your night into 3 parts. So you get a total of, 6 separate periods of 4 hours each. If your sessions are long in the beginning, it is easy to fall under the power of laxity and excitement. Since it is difficult to correct this state of mind once it has become a habit, you should have many short sessions. If you cut the session short while there's still a desire to meditate, you will be drawn to entering meditation subsequently, right? Because you have a good taste in your mouth when you leave your meditation cushion. If you make it too long and you're getting kind of agitated or the mind's getting too foggy and sleepy, well then your meditation cushion doesn't look so appealing, right? Otherwise, they say you will be overcome by nausea at the sight of your meditation seat. Once they have stabilized a bit, prolong the sessions while maintaining them, all free from the faults of excessive tension or slackness. These are the 2 kind of things that we're trying to avoid in our meditation. We'll talk about them more much later on, but even touch on them a little bit in this next section when we probably are going to get to that next week based on the time right now. But we see that when we meditate, there's those 2 forces, things getting very slack, loose, dull, even bordering on sleepiness, and then the excessive sort of tension and excitement and distraction that is often in our minds as well. If you practice in this way, Lama Tsongkhapa says, you will have few obstacles, and exhaustion, laxity, and lethargy will be pacified. Laxity and lethargy are 2 more kind of referring to those types of heavier states of mind, and exhaustion can kind of come with them, that sort of sleepiness. But, hopefully we can pacify any of these sorts of distractions. The next section is on what to do between sessions. As I said, we may have to stop there. I think I have, let's say 23 here, or actually you're in Santa Fe. Let's take a look at the slides that I have, because I think I have a few on some of this, on how long to sit during the 4 meditation sessions. So again, this is an ideal world where you have 4 meditation periods every day. I know most of you have no time for 4 meditation sessions. You're lucky if you can fit in 1. So do the best that you can. Don't think that this is an absolute instruction. This is what you would ideally do, particularly on a retreat. This is some advice from Geshe Sopa in his commentary, again on the great treatise Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim, the longer version. He says, therefore, Tsongkhapa recommends that in the beginning you sit for short sessions, as we saw, right? Even though he suggests 4 sessions per day, you can even break those up into additional shorter sessions, which sounds, now you want me to do like break them each up into 2 or 3, and then I have even more sessions I do. But if they're smaller, maybe you can manage that. I don't know. For example, in the early morning, don't do 1 long session. Instead, do a very short one. Sit only as long as you can maintain your mind's fresh, alert clarity. Then cut it off. After a break, to take a little rest, begin your meditation once again. And after a short time, stop once more Then, after another brief rest, begin again. You can proceed in this way many times. Again, this is even if you are doing retreats. Sometimes it's really useful not to like say, I'm going to do a 2 hour session, for each of these four or whatever you can manage. Maybe break it into, you know, 4 30-minute sessions so that you then have an opportunity to really work well with that 30 minutes or 15 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is that you can manage. Again, don't think that these are absolute numbers by any mean. Each of us has to work with our own situation and limitations. Then he goes on to say you should break off each session while you are still feeling fresh and still enjoying it. You should end each session before you become completely exhausted. Otherwise, you will get fed up, and the mere sight of your meditation cushion will make you want to vomit. We had the nausea in our text, but he's going a little further than the nausea. Anyway, just looking at your seat you will start to feel tired. So this is where we don't want to get to that point where every time we end a meditation session, we're regretting, that we spend so much time on it and we don't want to go back to it. We want to make it very tasty. It should be something like, oh, I get to meditate rather than I have to meditate. We want to have that kind of enthusiasm, and that is only there if we have actually been kind to ourselves in this process. On the other hand, if you always stop while you are still enjoying your session, then the next time you see your meditation seat, you will feel happy to sit again. All right, so then we're going to be going on to the periods between. Let me check the chat box. There may be some things in there. Lori was asking about the third part of the four opponent powers, this confession, regret, reliance. The third one is remedy. Yeah. So again, the remedy, this is where this is a wonderful device that we use to remember it in English with the four R's of regret, reliance, remedy, and refraining or restraint, sometimes called resolve. I think even is some term that some people use for that last one, making the resolve not to do those actions again. But thank you, Cynthia, for answering that for Lori as well in the chat box. So, um, any questions before we do our discussion? No? No questions? Anyone have anything they wanted to ask from tonight? Okay, I think I've gotten a direct question. Yeah. Okay, yeah, there was one here. The mandala chart, the last ring, isn't one missing as represented by the Dharma chakra? 37, my banner, victory, man, 30. Um, yeah, I have to take a look at that when I get home but there's usually three rings. So there's the base, there's the ring that goes right on top of the base. You fill that one, and then you put a second ring there, and then fill that one, and then you put the third ring on top of that, and then on top of that you put the Dharma chakra. Um, but again, you're putting piles of stuff on each of these levels that represent all these various things. But yeah, so I'll have to take a look at your question about, yeah, the last ring isn't one missing as represented by the Dharma chakra. 36, when you're going through the 37 is precious parasol, 37 is the banner of victory in all directions. And then there's 38 in the center, the most precious possessions of gods and humans. I think that that's, again, another heap that we put in there, but I don't know that they necessarily call it one of the numbered ones. Again, I don't have that with me, the materials that FPMT had in the past that they um, provided people to do it. Again, it's something you have to do repeatedly and get familiar with all the various things. And like I said, I did it many years ago for a while, and then I haven't done it for some time. But I know there was that phrase at the end about the precious possessions of gods and humans. So I'll have to take a look at that. You've got the Tibetan there. But thank you, Mary. I wish I had an answer more immediately for you. But any other questions before we break into our groups? Yes. Alexis, can you unmute? Uh, I'm still muted. Let's see. I can do it. ask you to unmute. I don't know if that does it. Let me see if there's any way for me to unmute you. I don't know. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Don.
Sure.
Um, this is a question that I've always thought about, but can you explain when they talk about the wheel of Dharma? I
Hmm.
just because it's not a Western term when we think of teachings, so I never quite understand what they really mean.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the wheel. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain more about that?
Oh, geez, I remember finding an explanation of it, and now it's kind of tonight's not. I'm not very sharp tonight for all of you. Can't answer Mary's question. Can't answer your question, Alexis. But let me take a look at it because I think what I did one presentation where I thought I had an answer to that. Why they use that term of the wheel? Does anyone else know? I mean, I'm not the only one with knowledge in the room. There's a lot of folks that have been studying a long time. I have not. It just doesn't come to mind as to why that's called the wheel of Dharma. I don't know. I'd have to look it up again. I'd be just guessing. So
Okay, thank you.
sorry. I'll take note of both of these, and I will do my best in 2 weeks when I'm back with all of you to have answers for both of those questions. So sorry about that. Just, yeah. Any other questions that I can answer? Sorry about that. That's one of the most important phrases for a teacher is I don't know. I'll see if I can find out. So anyway, I get to use it tonight. So, all right. Um, so no questions. Let's go ahead and break into our groups then. Let me put on the screen what we're going to be working with, which are there were two sets of questions that one is, yeah, this is number 6, homework 6. Remember that last week, because we left off with just the first two limbs, we did number 2, but only for the first two, prostrating and offering. So essentially, you can go through A and B. Well, actually, A we already did the entire thing, but B, describe each of the 7 limbs. Just go through the ones that were remaining, starting from confession through rejoicing, requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, supplicating to remain, and then the dedication limb, those 5. So again, you can explain each of those, describing them. Then number 3, the 3 activities that we went through tonight, how are each of the 7 limbs included within that? Then let's go ahead, and I think there's maybe one question from quiz 7, and or homework 7. By the way, I apologize, I didn't get homework 7 up that early this week. I'm really quite busy on this teaching tour, and this morning I go, oh no, I didn't put it out there. So anyway, I'll do better for the next one because I'll be home by then. No, there aren't any questions from number 7. So didn't need it anyway. So, but anyway, I'm glad I got it out there. You can work with this in preparing for next time when I will go into the time between sessions as well as some of this other discussion of the different types of meditation and what have you. All right, so you have just that to work with. And again, if you go through those and you want to discuss other things, you're welcome to do that. Maybe even review what I talked about in terms of meditating on the spiritual guide and any concerns or things you have on that. But all right, so we're going to just take a very short break, just a couple minutes to stretch or whatever, and then Shayla is very kindly going to have us all assigned to groups, and so you can come back and to partake of the discussion. If you're leaving the class, not participating in the group, be sure to dedicate all this positive potential so it's not wasted and makes it inexhaustible and increases it, all that kind of yummy stuff that we talked about earlier. So be sure to do that on your own then, okay? All right. Thanks everyone who is leaving, and I'll see some of you in the Zoom room and chat breakout room, and others I'll see when we reconvene 5 minutes before we end the class. All right. And this is the 4 topics that were covered within the understanding of reflecting on the kindness, remembering the kindness of the gurus. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the four reasons. Sorry, and I thought I had the other one up. Okay, four reasons why we can see our guru as a Buddha. Again, set out in the reverse order that Rinpoche recommends for Westerners. Nothing to trust in our own view. Again, that our perceptions are deceptive. Secondly, even nowadays, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are still working for sentient beings. I mean, why would they check out and say, we're not going to work for sentient beings anymore? They're still doing their job, especially Buddhas. But anyway, then thirdly, if we look at it, the guru is the agent, the doer of all the Buddha's actions. They're the ones doing the tantric empowerments and doing the initiations. I'm sorry, that is part of that, and doing the teachings and guiding people, and all of that that is happening is the actions of the gurus, are the actions of the Buddhas. And then finally, the fourth one, that was that quote that Vajradhara stated that the guru is a Buddha in the tantric teaching. So those are the four that pertain to why we can see that. This is the next section where we actually remember the kindness of the spiritual teacher in terms of four parts: that the guru is kinder than the Buddhas, that we recall the guru's kindness of teaching the Dharma specifically, the kindness of blessing, inspiring our minds. And again, in Pabonka Rinpoche's text, there's extensive information about each of these. We didn't go into them because they're not a part of the middle length Lamrim. But and number four, his kindness of supporting followers with material needs. This often happens with some gurus, right? That they actually help take care of, monastics or others who are their disciples and what have you. So those are the topics that, okay, let's go ahead and do our dedication prayers then. So, and we'll use the dedication prayers that we generally use for this class. Let me pull those on the screen. I think that's it. No, that wasn't it. Sorry. I've got so many things open here right now. Let me find the right file. That's the thing. It's a, no, it isn't. Where is it? Those are the homework. I got to go down further even. I got even more things open. They keep moving downward when I haven't opened them. Okay, there it is. I got to just simply go to prayers for teachings. Okay, so let's go to the dedication prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then the prayer for His Holiness is good health and long life. As we recite this, think that we're creating the causes for all our gurus who are still with us in this world in form, that we can have them here forever, as long as possible, with very good health and all their wishes to be fulfilled. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then the prayer for Rinpoche's reincarnation to be identified and for all to be auspicious, for that being to be of great benefit. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wear the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And lastly, we'll dedicate for all those beings that we're holding in our hearts right now. And again, with everything going on in our world, there are many to think of and places in the world where there's just unbelievable suffering. So again, send this positive energy out, sharing it with those beings happily. May they benefit from what we've done here tonight, have their suffering removed immediately, and all the causes that will bring them temporal and ultimate happiness ripen for them again in this instant, just through our strong thoughts. And may all beings have these same results through what we've done here together tonight, today, whatever time of day it is for you. Okay, Thank you all again. Appreciate you being here. And I'll look forward to being back in Santa Fe in 2 weeks. And yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much.